Howdy, Cape Codders. Welcome to the Scannell Agenda. This is show number 77, entitled New Tax Thinking, SJFS. SJFS stands for Stephen Jeffrey Francis Scannell. No new taxes. You know, that's the tired and worn out Republican slogan. No new taxes. Okay, that translates into no new thinking. In other words, unlike Democrats, the Republicans just don't want, they're just overtired. They don't want to think about reform. They're just sick of it from the Democrats, and kind of a lot of cockeyed reforms on the part of the Democrats. That's my feeling, is that they have all these wasteful programs that are built up and piled one on top of the other. And it just drives conservatives, I'm somewhat conservative, just drives us a little nuts. If you can't maintain the systems you have and they're not working, you want to develop new systems on top of all these broken systems. That's kind of crazy. So I am a Republican Party maverick, you might say, or outsider. So I never did buy the no new taxes slogan. I always thought it was kind of like a shutdown. Oh, you're going to shut down thinking. No new thinking. Simply because the market quota system of fishery management is a new tax. So a Republican would say, oh, is this a new tax? Yeah. Oh, well, forget it. We're not going to go to step A and even uncover the pros and cons of reform. We're not even going to get there. So that's extremely frustrating. That's a big frustration people have with the Republican Party, is the no new thinking slogan. And that's exactly what it is, no new thinking. Republicans are overtired. Republicans are worn out from Democrat Party nuttiness, I guess you might say. You know, and if you don't think it's nutty, just look at the issue that I still struggle with and did struggle with for a number of years on Nantucket, and that was the salt pond issue, where the nutty left-wing people got to kill our salt ponds on Nantucket. And then, of course, on the Vineyard, no, they didn't touch those over there. And that's just nutty behavior. It's also unlawful behavior, and I was trying to get to the bottom of that. Unconscionable stuff goes on when we allow money into politics, and then the triangulation starts happening, and it's just a wet blanket from there on in. It's just it's not democracy, truly. It's not how it works with all the money in politics. So we need the Scannell Amendment to get the money out of politics. Now, the new taxes, first of all, we have a problem that is a character issue in the United States of America, and that is we lack gumption. So gumption is the only cure. We're in a general malaise, as my mom would say. We're kind of sickly as a democracy goes, and that's because of the money in politics. We're not confronting the problems when we're seemingly very weak, and we need to be stronger. We need guts, we need courage, intestinal fortitude's another word for it. When you add all this money into politics, it's like eating junk food. You're just going to be a sickly person. Okay. I used to say Bay Bridge is the place of 1,000 daily victories. And also, and this is a good saying, of whom much is given, much is expected. So I'm saying we're better than this, to let the money in politics come in and sicken us and take our gumption away. That's just what's going on. So since I have a lot of reforms to pull off, and one of them is the town nurse-based system. And as I mentioned, this is critical to reform of the social services. And if we do this, we're going to have 5 times the quality, and it's going to cost us a third of what we're spending now. And we'll get such an increase in quality of life for disabled people and problem people. Oh my God, we're not all disabled, are we? I mean, when you say disabled, that means we can't find a place for you. That's bad. So, there are all kinds of issues that go with reform, and one of them is, to me, foundational, and that is a good identification system and a good voting system. These are some of the most foundational things we need to get after as far as reform goes. But I believe in new tax thinking because I have reforms that are based on sort of a mindset of market quota system, which simply is tax what you don't like and subsidize what you do like. It's also known as I push, a pick your own strawberries system. In other words, it's a business mechanization of government functioning, which a lot of people have always talked about over the years. But right now, we are in a situation where Americans hoard bad systems. We're in a situation where we've hoarded a lot of bad systems, and we have this oligarchy over us, and we can't reform with an oligarchy hovering over us. It's as if we're weak and stupid, but it's the money in politics that makes us look weak and stupid. So we're failing to reform and use common sense in how we handle governmental issues. In other words, we have no codfish, but we're not going to reform the fisheries. And we're kind of looking sick. And by the way, America is being followed by the rest of the world on some of these systems, and it's really tragic for the world. We had a reputation of good system design, but with the money in politics, you can't design good systems into that because it's a favoritism-based system. It's like a banana republic system, the oligarchy, as opposed to two-party establishment style system, which we had, and I feel we're being kept by this oligarchy, and both parties are kept parties of this conglomerate of money-interested, groups, let's say. And it is a dangerous situation to be involving yourself with. It truly is dangerous. So, we have allocation-based fisheries, it's called, and we've, granted a few people with these rights in perpetuity. So it's really hard to think of these systems as anything but dysfunctional, because you can't correlate this to a business mindset, because a fisheries business mindset would look at the assets, as I've mentioned 1 billion times on the show, but we don't look at the assets. We look at the fishermen and say, oh, what do the fishermen want to do? It is pathetic, but that's part of the oligarchy problems that we're suffering with now. So one reform that I want to do here in the United States is tit-for-tat tax reform, after we do this, after we simplify the tax codes, then we shall be able in a good situation, we'll be in a good situation to do some reforms. So it's like you got to clean your house and then redecorate. You got to get a bunch of junk out, and then you can do your redecoration of the house interior, etc. So we have hoarded a lot of programs and tax loopholes, etc., etc. So with a tax words job, this is what I'm calling it. It's a job to reduce the amount of words in the tax code. And I think Donald Trump has the right idea. He's trying to simplify everything. Whereas if you don't get after it and do some house cleaning once in a while, and this is not the strong suit of the Democrats, it is for the strong suit, I think, of the Republicans to get in there and simplify things. So maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't think so. So you want to get in with a program. I have a program designed, and it's got 5 brackets. And you need to do this deal with incremental steps. And if you do it that way, it's easy enough. So your first step to decrease the words in the tax code by 10%. That will be the easiest. But then you have benefits to congressional staffers. In other words, huge bonuses for the staffers to be in charge of this work, not the lobbyists, and pay them handsomely. And then you go to a 20%. Now that you're on a roll and you realize how to, and that's important, how to reduce the number of words in the tax code. And so if you had a goal of 80% fewer words, and then you'd take 3 years to do this. And the tax cuts that you would attach to the code reduction, the words in the tax code going to be reduced. And when they're reduced, I know we just passed the tax code reform. I think it should have been done this way so that we could do it incrementally and then reduce taxes by virtue of the fact that that is a reward of reducing the number of words in the tax code, substantially reducing, let's say 80%, 87% fewer words in the tax code. And then once you reduce the words, then you reduce the tax. That's the incentive. And of course pay the staffers to get this done, and the Congress would be in charge of their staff. So we need to do that deal. Still, there's a lot of tax reform to do. And I believe in simplicity very strongly. So here I have a system of taxation which is, you might say, onerous. It's 12% federal sales tax, and that would include internet sales. And then 12% meals tax, 12% renters tax, and then to go along with this, an international, if we could pull it off, wealth tax. That might be tough to do. And a post office would be in charge of a census count, and there would be a $2.50 head tax. So in by way of reforms, you need to have money for the reforms. So, I'm just looking for something here. So I have something called here it is. Mega System Food, Soil, and Recycle. And I've had a show on this before. So if you're interested in a food and a soil and a recycle system, and you might say, well, what do these things have in common? The point of sale would be the common denominator that would bind these three together. So your recycle system, I've spoken about this, would be a materials handling system whereby we would tax what we don't like and incentivize what we do like as far as recyclability of pretty much everything. But and then your soil systems would be incentivizing good organic soils. And then your food that comes from good organic soils would be subsidized because we want healthy people. And so you could do things like tax your herbicides and your pesticides and your chemical fertilizers. And using that style of a taxation system, then you would put that same money and match it up a few times perhaps into the organic farming, small local farms perhaps. And this would dovetail with the town nurse-based system because you would be able to load a lot of people onto these little farms. And these are work positions, job and bunk. These are clubhouse work positions, rooming houses, camps. I mean, you got to have a place for people to go. And we've got a situation that is deplorable with people camping out on the street. And if it weren't for Facebook, I really wouldn't know this was going on because the mainstream media, so-called, I haven't seen it in the news, but it's a huge issue with me once I did see it. And I said, oh my God, it's worse than I thought. And you know, Hyannis always had somewhat of a population of homeless people. Man, that's nothing compared to California. So we need these reforms. We need the money to be spent on these reforms. If we spend the money on the reforms, these are my reforms, fisheries, town nurse-based system, MFSR, that's Mega System, Food, Soil, and Recycle. And then, of course, the transit system, the green grid transit system. If we spend the money on systems that produce dividends, all these produce major dividends, then you can justify the new taxation and the new thinking on taxes. As my dad would say, you got to get that monkey off your back. That's when I smoke grass. And it's almost like we're addicted to all these toxic social service ways that we have. Like we're kind of HIPAA sick. And this is something that I'll talk about more down the road. But the privacy laws affect our due diligence, our abilities. And they actually, these HIPAA laws, empower evil in a way because there's a lot of secrets that are kept that shouldn't be secrets, that are because they relate to the taxpayer dollar. I see things that the taxpayers don't see because I'm in the different world, the world of, you might say, disability and poverty and poor and disabled, whatever, clubhouse, different programs. Oh. So where you have money to reform these systems and you know the reforms you want to go and implement, such as the market quota system of fisheries, which takes money to do that program because you would be employing the poor and disabled and other people. You'd be employing us to build artificial reefs. That's pretty much work that disabled people can do. Building boats is good work. It's like basket weaving if you don't have the chemicals. In other words, if you have a hot mold system, you can build boats, as opposed to the West system, which is wood epoxy saturation technique. These would be great boats, or floating marine laboratories that disability people can build the parts and the hulls, etc. But you need money to do all this stuff. But the question you have to ask is the money there to justify the expense? Any businessman or banker or accountant has to go forward from that point. So we're not doing that. We don't have the businessman's mindset. Dad was in business. I mean, I had a payroll, small payroll. But you've got to have the point of view that what you're going to do is going to pay the dividends and justify the expense. So these are the reforms which can justify the expense of what you might call an onerous 12% federal tax, sales tax, which might get me put back at Taunton State Hospital with the Republicans. But I really don't want to hear from Republicans that can't do new thinking. Really. This is like backwards. If we can't do fisheries management thinking because we can't think, in other words, we can't think about anything that is a new tax. We can't think about that. It is a new tax, and we have pledged that we can't think about that. So it's like putting yourself in an intellectual straitjacket. That's what Republicans have done. So, it's not the way to go. Now, would you do that in a small town? No, you wouldn't. Your small town would be fairly conscious, okay, of your systems in a small town. You know, your DPW, your water department, your marine department, none of these little departments in a town would be allowed to go south the way the state and federal systems have been allowed to go south. But we allow it. Like I said, we hoard these bad systems, and we just keep pumping money in them because that's status quo oligarchy style of government now that we have. We don't have a two-party establishment system. And it has happened gradually, as Al Gore would say. You know, you put the frog in some water and you slowly turn up the heat. Okay, that frog's not going to jump out. He's just going to sit there and he'll die from the heat. But if you throw that frog into some hot water, that frog will jump right out of there. So these systems have degenerated over time. And the oligarchy will bless these systems, the oligarchy-based system. Whereas the two-party establishment style democracy will allow for someone to come in and clean house and reform. It's just a miracle that Trump got elected. I thought it was a miracle that it happened because of the numbers of people that are supporting the oligarchy-based system. The people that want the favors. This is both party people. Remember, there was such a hatred for Trump in the Republican Party. Don't forget that. And here in Massachusetts, the Republicans here are not dominant who are for Trump. They are afraid, I guess. But I'm not. I'm not afraid. So if you go ahead and put extra taxes on that are being instantaneously producing dividends, that's the only way you can justify new taxes. In other words, if you reform the social services and that instantaneously saves you a huge amount of money, which I advocate that it would, that if we do the societal services systems reforms with the clubhouse, with the town nurse-based system, the job and bunk, the different ideas that I have. If you do these, the instant savings of money will be there. And that's the only way to justify, from a business point of view, to justify spending the kind of money that I'm talking about. We tax and spend, but the spending is not for silly-dilly Democrat Party programs. It's for hardcore, conservative style, very simplified style programs that work. Because by virtue of the fact that your local town nurse-based social services people will be elected and be running a social services system on a very local basis, that is, on a local basis such as an ambulance district, fire district. That's how local I'm talking about. By virtue of the fact that, as I say, the town systems with your marine department, your DPW, your water works department, your water department, your other departments in a town, they're not going to go south the way these systems of state and federal bureaucracies have gone south. So the main systems that we're talking about here with this 12% federal sales tax would be the Green Grid T. And the Green Grid T is, well, what is a green grid? It's comprised of hydrogen and compressed air, basically. In addition to the compressed air would be oxygen-rich compressed air, because when you crack water into its component, hydrogen and oxygen, well then, what are you going to do with the oxygen? Your hydrogen is your frozen electricity. If we go ahead with this Green Grid T, we will not have the need to improve the high tension wires in our smart grids. So-called smart grids are not as smart as this green grid. Because what the green grid is far superior to the smart grid, in that the green grid is bottled electricity. It's electricity on tap. It's not in a battery, it's in a pipe, which is even better. You're not going to lose any hydrogen in the pipe or compressed air. And the compressed air can power your refrigeration and your air conditioning. And now with the PV and the lighting and a few batteries and this and that, there's just no call for centralized electric grid. But as I've mentioned, the Love Power Grid Consortium can stop this capital fight between the green energy and the dinosaur energies, the fossil fuels. So we not only need to have a transition, but we need to have an organized transition between, these green capital reformation and fossil fuel dinosaur. It has to be done and orchestrated.